Evan Brooks arrived at the Imperial Interstellar Embassy long before the suns rose above the colony's horizon. The sky outside was still a deep violet, sprinkled with the last fading stars. But Evan had already begun his quiet walk toward the entrance. His steps were slow, but steady, the kind of rhythm a man develops after years of waking before dawn. The embassy guards barely looked at him as he approached. They had seen hundreds of workers pass through, and a human janitor was not someone who usually earned attention. Yet Evan didn't mind. He preferred peace, silence, and routines that didn't require him to talk too much. He was a single father raising his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, and most of his energy went into giving her a stable life. After a difficult few years back on Earth, he had accepted this job on the new colony because it promised safety, steady pay, and a future where Lily could grow without fear. Even if the job was simple cleaning, fixing small things, keeping order in forgotten corridors, Evan was grateful for it. Inside the embassy, the hallways were wide and bright, made of smooth, metallic materials that gleamed under soft blue lights. Unlike human buildings, the alien architecture curved gently, as if the walls were grown instead of built. Evan always admired this design quietly, even though he knew no one cared about his opinion. He was just the cleaning staff, easy to overlook. He signed in, grabbed his equipment, and started down the first hallway, humming a little tune under his breath. He often hummed because it kept him calm and kept his mind from drifting back to worries bills. Lily's schoolwork, her habit of forgetting her lunchbox, her shy personality, and whether she truly felt safe here. Every few minutes he passed different members of the alien staff. Some were tall, with deep silver skin and glowing patterns across their arms. Others had softer features with pale blue eyes that blinked slowly as if calculating every motion. They nodded politely at him, but rarely spoke more than a word or two. Evan didn't blame them. Humans were still new on this planet, still learning the customs, still trying to prove they were worth trusting. He kept his head down and his work honest, believing that respect came from consistency, not loudness. But this morning felt different. As Evan moved toward the central wing, he noticed a group of royal guards standing unusually close together. Their uniforms, normally pristine, looked slightly wrinkled, and their expressions were tense. Alien facial expressions were harder for Evan to read than human ones, but even he knew something was wrong. Their eyes were sharp, their shoulders stiff, and their quiet conversation came in quick. Strained tones. Evan didn't mean to listen, but the echo in the corridor carried their voices to him. "They are weakening fast," one guard said, his voice full of fear. "The medics have tried everything. Nothing stabilizes them." "The Emperor hasn't slept in 2 days." Evan slowed but kept sweeping, pretending to focus on a small piece of dust on the floor. He wasn't the sort of person who liked sticking his nose in other people's business. But it was impossible not to hear the pain in their words. The triplets. "They won't survive the cycle," another guard whispered. Triplets. He didn't even know the Emperor had newborn children. The royal family was a distant mystery to most human workers. Heavily guarded and rarely seen, Evan felt a small tug inside his chest. The same tug he used to feel when Lily caught a fever and curled up in his arms, shivering. Parenting brought a unique kind of fear, a silent panic that lived beneath the surface. Hearing the desperation in those guards' voices awakened that old memory. He forced himself to look away and continue walking. He had no place in their world. He wasn't a doctor, a scientist, or anyone important. He was simply a man trying to keep his daughter's life steady. And yet his heart felt heavier than before. Later that day, while he emptied waste bins in the engineering bay, a soft buzzing alarm echoed through the building. It wasn't loud or frightening. It was the kind of alert that only staff understood something wrong. But not life-threatening to the public. Workers moved faster than usual. Whispered conversations filled the air. Everyone seemed preoccupied, distracted. Even the air felt tense, as if the building itself understood that something painful was unfolding behind closed doors. Evan continued his rounds. Though his mind kept drifting back to the guard's words, he tried to shake it off. He had his own problems. Month-end rent, Lily's upcoming school evaluation, and a broken heater in their small apartment. The Emperor's children belonged to an entirely different world, one where the halls were polished, the rooms vast, and every corner guarded by advanced technology. Near the end of his shift, Evan received an unexpected maintenance request. The message read, "Immediate attention required. Corridor 7B. Restricted zone, but janitorial clearance approved." Evan blinked. Restricted zones rarely needed him. Most were serviced by specialized staff. He double-checked the message, but it was genuine. He gathered his tools and followed the directions, unaware that this single request would change the entire course of his life. As he approached Corridor 7B, 2 guards scanned him twice, confirming the emergency clearance. They didn't speak. They only opened the doors silently, allowing him into a dim, quiet hallway filled with soft golden lights. The moment Evan stepped inside, he felt a tone atmosphere different from any other part of the building. The air was warm, almost comforting, and the sound of faint machines hummed in the distance. He realized with a strange sense of awe, this was the wing near the royal nursery. He kept his eyes down, reminding himself not to stare or wander. He located the malfunctioning console on the wall, set down his tools, and began working. While he adjusted a loose power connection, he heard footsteps behind him, slow, heavy, carrying weight not just in sound, but in emotion. He turned hesitantly. Standing only a few steps away was Emperor Corvin himself. Even Evan, who rarely reacted openly, felt his breath pause. The Emperor was taller than the guards, his presence powerful yet strangely fragile in that moment. His silver skin shimmered under the lights, but his face looked deeply tired as dim. Shoulders slightly bent, in his arms rested a tiny infant wrapped in soft fabric. The child looked weak. Breathing unevenly, Evan's heart tightened. He recognized that expression in the Emperor's eyes. The quiet fear of a parent expecting the worst. Evan immediately bowed his head, unsure if that was the right gesture. He felt like he had intruded on a moment too personal for someone like him. But instead of anger, the Emperor's voice was soft. "You are the human worker, Evan Brooks." Evan swallowed. "Yes, sir. I'm just fixing the panel. I'll finish quickly." The Emperor shook his head gently. "It is fine. You did not disturb anything. You may continue your work." But Evan couldn't move. He kept glancing at the fragile infant, who let out a small sound, weak whimper. The Emperor noticed his concern. "You have a child?" the Emperor asked quietly. "Yes," Evan replied. "A daughter. She's 7. The Emperor looked down at the infant. "Then you understand. This is one of my triplets. They are fading." His voice cracked slightly. No medic can explain why. Evan felt an ache deep inside his chest. He didn't dare offer advice. He wasn't a doctor. But he also couldn't pretend not to recognize the familiar signs of a struggling baby, the restless breathing, the limp body, the way the child leaned instinctively toward warmth. Evan carefully chose his words. "When Lily was little," he said softly, "sometimes she only calmed down with warmth and a steady heartbeat. Simple things sometimes made the biggest difference." The Emperor listened as though clinging to every word. Evan quickly added, "I'm not saying I know the answer. I'm just speaking as a father." For a moment, the powerful Emperor of an entire alien system looked like nothing more than a tired parent desperate for any hope. "Sometimes," the Emperor whispered, "the simplest answers are the ones we cannot see." Evan didn't respond. He simply nodded, his heart heavy with empathy. He returned to his work, but he felt the Emperor's quiet gaze on him the entire time. And something told him that this small encounter, accidental, unexpected, and deeply human, was only the beginning of a much larger story neither of them could foresee. The hours after Evan's unexpected meeting with the Emperor felt heavier than any workday he had ever lived through. Even after he finished repairing the malfunctioning panel and quietly left the restricted corridor, the image of the weak infant, resting in the Emperor's arms, stayed with him like a shadow. Evan returned to the main wing carrying his tools, but his thoughts didn't stay in the present. They drifted back to the tired look in the Emperor's eyes, the small whimper of the child, and the quiet way the Emperor had listened to him. He kept replaying that moment, wondering how a simple janitor like him ended up speaking to one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. As he walked through the embassy, staff continued to move quickly, whispering to each other with tense expressions. The mood throughout the building had shifted into a silent storm. Everyone could feel something was wrong, even those who were not allowed near the royal nursery. Evan heard bits of conversations as he passed. The medics are still trying. Treatment stabilizes them. If the royal heirs fail to recover, he didn't want to listen, yet every word sank into him. Evan had always been someone who carried emotions quietly, without speaking them out loud. And right now, worry clung to him in a way that wouldn't let go, when his shift finally ended. He picked up Lily from the learning center. She ran toward him with her usual small smile, holding her backpack with both hands. "Daddy, today we painted planets," she announced proudly. Evan smiled and brushed her hair gently. "That sounds fun. Did you enjoy it?" "Yes. But I missed you a little," she said, slipping her hand into his. He squeezed her hand softly. "I missed you too." They walked home together along the colony's walkway, where glowing lights lined the path and gentle, artificial breezes cooled the warm air. Families of all kinds, human, alien, and mixed, moved through the streets, each living their own peaceful routine. Evan liked this part of the evening. For a few minutes he could forget the pressures of the day and simply be a dad. But tonight, even Lily's stories couldn't erase the heaviness in his chest. At home, while Lily drew pictures at the table, Evan sat quietly on the couch. He should have been relaxing, maybe making dinner, maybe checking Lily's school notes. Dead. He kept wondering about the Emperor's triplets. He wondered if the infant he saw was still breathing, or if the condition had worsened. He didn't know why he cared so much. Maybe it was because he knew what it meant to feel helpless as a parent. He had lived through moments where doctors gave confusing answers, and nights where Lily's fever felt like a battle he didn't know how to win. Being a parent meant loving someone so deeply that fear felt like a constant companion. Later that night, after putting Lily to bed, Evan stepped onto the small balcony of their apartment. The view looked peaceful, soft lights across the colony, the gentle hum of distant ships, and two pale moons rising slowly. Everything felt calm, yet Evan's heart remained unsettled. He leaned on the railing side and whispered to himself, "I hope those babies hold on." The next morning, he returned to work, still carrying the same worry. Inside the embassy, the tension had grown even heavier. Guards stood in tighter formations, their eyes sharper. Medics hurried through hallways, pushing carts filled with equipment. Even the faint hum of machinery seemed faster than usual, as if the building itself sensed the desperation. Evan kept his head low and went about his tasks, though he moved slower than normal. He kept thinking he might accidentally hear news, good or bad, about the children. In the afternoon, he was called to another maintenance issue, this time in a different restricted wing. As he reached the checkpoint, the guard scanned him and frowned. "You again?" the guard asked, not rude but surprised. "I was assigned another repair," Evan replied carefully. The guard exchanged a look with the other guard, then nodded. "Proceed. Don't stray from the work area." Evan continued inside, feeling a little uneasy. He wondered if someone had mistakenly entered his ID into the system, or if he was simply unlucky enough to keep getting maintenance. Requests in sensitive areas. The hallway felt different from the one yesterday. Here the light was brighter, but the air colder. The walls had a sleek silver design, and the silence was deeper, almost echoing. Evan set down his tools and knelt near the malfunctioning energy plate. He had barely started working when a soft voice behind him said, "You again." Evan froze for a second before turning slowly. It was not the Emperor this time. It was a royal medic, one of the lead specialists assigned to the royal children. The medic had pale blue eyes and gentle silver markings along her face that shimmered under stress. Evan stood up quickly. "Sorry, ma'am. I was sent here for repairs." The medic nodded. "Yes, I know." The order was intentional. Evan blinked. "Intentional? Someone asked for me specifically?" "Yes," the medic replied. "The Emperor requested that if any maintenance was needed in these wings, you should be allowed through." Evan nearly dropped his tools. "But why?" The medic studied him carefully. because after you left yesterday, the Emperor mentioned your suggestion. The human idea of warmth, presence, and calm comfort, he found it thought-provoking. Evan felt his ears grow warm. I didn't suggest anything important. I only spoke from experience as a parent. Sometimes, the medic said softly, simple experiences matter more than complex knowledge. Her expression dimmed, and she added, the infants are weakening further. We are trying everything, but their condition continues to fall. The Emperor is desperate for answers. Evan swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say. He felt sorry for them truly, but he also felt out of place here. He was a janitor with no medical training. He couldn't possibly help, yet a small voice inside him whispered differently. It reminded him of the infant in the Emperor's arms, how the child had leaned slightly toward him. It reminded him of Lily when she was a baby, how she responded to steady breathing and gentle touch. He wasn't a doctor, but he was a father. Parenting had taught him things textbooks never mentioned. Still, he did not dare offer more advice. He didn't want to seem disrespectful. After finishing the repair, Evan tried to exit the wing. Quietly, but before he reached the door, he heard a sudden commotion from deeper, inside sharp voices and hurried footsteps. Medics sprinted down the hallway, carrying equipment and calling out instructions. Something serious was happening, eh? A loud alarm rang in the air, one Evan had never heard before. It wasn't a building emergency alarm. It was something more urgent, more personal, filled with coded tones. The medic from earlier rushed past him. One of the triplets has fallen into critical distress. Evan froze. Part of him wanted to move, to help, to do something. But what could he possibly do? He wasn't allowed near the royal nursery. He wasn't trained for anything important. He stepped aside as more staff ran by, but a guard suddenly grabbed his arm. You, come with us. Evan stared at him in shock. Me, why? No time to explain. The Emperor requested you. Evan's heart began to pound, and his breath came unevenly as he followed the guards down the long hallway, deeper into the royal wing. He didn't know why he was being summoned. He didn't know what he could offer. But he knew this was something important, something life-changing. The guards opened a large door, and Evan stepped inside. For the first time, he saw the royal nursery. Soft lights glowed overhead, delicate machines hummed around, and in the center stood the Emperor holding one of the infants, limp, barely breathing. The Emperor lifted his eyes and looked directly at Evan with a mixture of desperation and fragile hope. Evan Brooks, the Emperor said, I need your help. Evan felt the world fall silent around him. He did not know what he was supposed to do. He did not know why the Emperor believed in him. But as he stared at the tiny infant struggling to stay alive, he knew one thing with complete certainty. He couldn't walk away. Not now. The nursery was bright, warm, and filled with a steady hum of machines, but the atmosphere felt anything but peaceful. Every medic in the room moved with urgent speed, their hands adjusting controls, checking readings, and calling out instructions. Yet none of their efforts seemed to change the terrible truth. One of the triplets lay limp in the Emperor's arms, breath shallow and faint. As if life was slipping away with each passing moment, Evan stood just inside the doorway, frozen by shock. He had never imagined he would be summoned into a private place like this, let alone during a moment so critical. He could feel the sharp tension in the room, the fear, the silent plea for anything that might help. The Emperor looked at him with eyes that held both deep worry and a fragile hope. Evan Brooks, he said, his voice rough and unstable. I called for you because nothing else is helping my child, the medic said, that your presence might hold something different. Evan's heart hammered against his ribs. Your Majesty, I'm not sure what I can do, he said quietly. I am just a janitor. I don't know medicine. I do not need medicine right now, the Emperor replied, his voice trembling slightly. I need something else. Something only a parent would understand. The words hit Evan with surprising force. He stepped forward slowly, aware of every pair of eyes watching him. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. His entire life, he had lived quietly, working honest jobs, raising his daughter, avoiding trouble. Now, suddenly, he was being asked to help save royal infants. The lead medic stepped across from him. her face tight with worry. "We have discovered that the triplets' condition worsens in the presence of strong emotional energy," she explained quickly. "Our species emits powerful emotional frequencies. Even our calmest state is too overwhelming for them." "We are harming them without meaning to," Evan frowned. "Because your emotions affect them physically?" "Yes," she said. "They are sensitive. Every feeling, fear, hope, sadness reaches their bodies." "And humans?" Evan asked. "Humans emit a much gentler emotional field," she explained. "More neutral, more balanced, almost soothing." Evan looked at the Emperor. "So you want me to—" "What? Just hold the baby?" The Emperor pressed the weak infant gently toward Evan. "I want you to do what a father does when his child cannot breathe without comfort." Evan hesitated only for a moment. Then he reached out and took the tiny infant carefully into his hands. The child was so light that Evan felt like he was holding a whisper instead of a body. The baby's skin shimmered faintly, and the faint rise and fall of their chest looked painfully slow. Evan shifted his arms the way he used to hold Lily when she was an infant head, resting against his chest, body supported by both hands. He took a steady breath, trying to keep himself calm. He knew that in moments like this, a baby responded to the emotion of the person holding them. It didn't matter if the baby was human or alien. Calmness mattered. Warmth mattered. The room fell completely silent. Evan began humming softly without even thinking. It was a tune he used to hum to Lily late at night, something gentle and smooth. His heartbeat was steady, his warmth spreading naturally to the small child. Everyone watched closely as the tiny infant let out a small, almost peaceful sigh. The Emperor's eyes widened, and the medic stepped forward, checking the baby's readings. The monitor that had shown weak, fading signals began to rise slowly, stabilizing just a little. "It's working," a medic whispered. "His emotional field is soothing the infant." "It is not a treatment," another medic said, "but it is stabilizing the child's breathing." Evan didn't move. He kept humming softly, shifting his weight slightly as he held the infant close to his chest. The fragile baby's trembling breaths gradually grew smoother. Tiny fingers curled around the fabric of Evan's shirt, gripping it with surprising strength. A quiet gasp spread through the room. "He's responding." The Emperor whispered in disbelief. "He is calming." Evan felt something warm fill his chest. It reminded him of the long nights he had spent comforting Lily when they lived alone. With no help, no family, and no idea if he was good enough as a father. Those nights had been lonely, difficult, and exhausting, but they had taught him how to steady a frightened child. Now, strangely, those same skills were helping save the heir to an entire empire. After several minutes, the lead medic stepped forward and whispered, "If the human's presence stabilizes one infant, we must try this method with all three." The Emperor looked at Evan with deep gratitude and also with hesitation. "Would you be willing to stay? To help?" Evan looked down at the tiny child in his arms. The infant's breathing was still delicate, still faint, but clearly more stable. He lifted his gaze toward the Emperor. "Yes," he said softly. "I'll help." The Emperor exhaled, as though releasing a boulder from his chest. The medics gently brought the second infant, who looked only slightly stronger than the first. They created a safe setup with cushions and controlled temperature. Ensuring the environment would not overwhelm the babies, Evan carefully handed the first child to a medic. He then reached for the second. This one let out a quiet, distressed cry, tiny but sharp. Evan adjusted his arms slowly. Supporting the small head gently with his palm, again, he hummed softly again. The baby slowly relaxed. By the time the third infant was brought to him, the room was filled with a different kind of silence, one filled not with fear, but with hope. The medics watched in awe, whispering to each other as they recorded the changes in the infant's vitals. The Emperor watched with deep emotion, his strong posture softened by gratitude that he could not put into words. When Evan held the third child, something unexpected happened. The infant opened their eyes, large, bright, and shimmering with faint light. It was the first time that day any of the triplets had opened their eyes fully. "Look," the medic whispered, hand over her mouth. He's responding. Immediately, the Emperor stepped closer, his voice almost breaking as he whispered, "You are doing the unthinkable, Evan Brooks." Evan shook his head gently. "No, I'm just holding them." "Anyone who loves a child would do this?" "No," the Emperor said firmly. "Not anyone. Many people love children, but not everyone carries the kind of calm strength you carry." Evan didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to praise, especially not from someone as powerful as the Emperor. He simply focused on the baby in his arms. Letting the soft weight rest against his chest, the medics began adjusting their reports. They now had proof. A human emotional field was the safest environment for the triplets. "Fragile state," one medic spoke quietly to the Emperor. "If we create a rotation schedule, he may need to be present regularly until the infants recover their natural strength." The Emperor nodded. "Then make the arrangements." Evan blinked. "Arrangements for me?" "Yes," the Emperor said. "If you agree, you will stay near the nursery. You will be given a comfortable place for rest. We will take care of everything you need. Your daughter will have access as well, if necessary." Evan's mind raced. He wasn't ready for these kinds of changes. His life was simple, and he had kept it simple for Lily's sake. He didn't want to bring her into a world filled with high expectations and powerful emotions. But then he looked at the 3 tiny infants, each relying on him to stay alive. Their breaths steadied when he held them. Their bodies relaxed. Their eyes opened. They needed him, and someone desperately needed him. The Emperor. A father who stood on the edge of losing everything. Evan took a slow breath. "If this will help the babies live, then yes, I'll stay." The Emperor closed his eyes briefly in relief and placed his hand gently on Evan's shoulder, a gesture of trust, of gratitude, of deep respect. "You have given me hope," the Emperor said softly. "Hope I thought was lost." Evan didn't know what the future would bring. He didn't know how long he would be needed or how difficult this journey might become. But as he gently rocked the 3rd infant in his arms, he knew one thing with certainty. This was no longer just a job. This was the beginning of something far greater, a connection no one ever imagined possible. A bond that could bridge 2 species, 2 worlds. And to fathers who had nothing in common except the love they carried for their children. The days that followed became heavier, and each hour felt like a new test for Adrian. The human janitor, who had unexpectedly become the last hope for 3 alien children. The triplets' condition improved slightly after the strange healing energy responded to his touch, but their recovery was still incomplete. Each improvement came slowly, like a faint sunrise fighting against thick clouds. Adrian stayed strong on the outside, but inside, he battled fear, every minute fear of losing them, fear of failing, and fear of disappointing an entire alien empire that was suddenly depending on him. The alien emperor. Valerius watched Adrian closely during these days. He did not hover or interrupt, but he observed in a way that showed deep respect and silent worry. Adrian noticed that the emperor rarely slept. He often stood near the healing chamber late at night, staring at his children with a tired but determined expression. Adrian understood that look. It was the same expression he had worn the night his wife passed away, leaving him alone with their small daughter. Pain reshaped people, whether human or alien. One evening, when the lights of the palace dimmed and only the soft blue glow of the triplets' healing pods remained, Adrian found the emperor standing alone beside them. His face looked older than usual, like the weight of the entire galaxy sat across his shoulders. Adrian quietly approached, unsure if he should interrupt. But Valerius spoke first. "They dream," the emperor said in a low voice. "Even when asleep, they dream of light." Their mother used to tell them stories about gentle worlds where the stars sing. She believed dreams were a way for children to stay brave. I hope she is right. For the first time, Adrian saw a vulnerable side to the powerful emperor. He was not a ruler in that moment. He was just a father trying to keep his children alive. Adrian nodded softly. "Children are stronger than we think. They hold on to hope better than adults." Valerius turned toward him, his eyes glowing faintly. "And you, Adrian, you hold something inside you that even our scientists cannot explain. The energy that responds to your touch, is ancient, older than my empire. It chooses protectors. Perhaps it chose you." Adrian didn't know what to say. He had no answers. He was only doing what any father would do. He was trying to save lives. But hearing that something powerful was working through him made him uneasy. He had never believed he was special. He still didn't want to believe it. But the triplets' slow recovery made it impossible to deny that something unusual was happening. The following morning, the palace healers arrived with new scans. The triplets' vital signs had grown stronger, but they still needed one more large surge of stabilizing energy, something even the emperor himself could not produce. The healers explained that the ritual chamber, the deepest and oldest room in the palace, could channel the energy safely. But someone had to stand in the middle of the chamber and release it. That someone was Adrian. The emperor stood firm. "I will not force you, but I must ask you." "My children are running out of time," Adrian hesitated. The idea of standing inside an alien ritual chamber filled with ancient power sounded frightening. But when he looked at the triplets, who lay peacefully in their pods, breathing softly but struggling, his hesitation melted away. He did not see alien children. He saw little ones fighting to live, children who deserved a chance to grow up, laugh, play, and chase glowing butterflies in the palace gardens. "I'll do it," Adrian said firmly. The emperor placed a hand on his shoulder with surprising gentleness. "Then I will stand with you." Preparations for the ceremony began. The chamber was located under the palace, reachable only by a long spiral staircase decorated with symbols Adrian couldn't read. As he entered the room, a sudden warmth brushed across his skin, as if the chamber recognized him. The walls glowed faintly, swirling with soft light that moved like water. Valerius explained that the chamber responded to life energy it amplified, whatever lived inside a person, bringing it to the surface. For a moment, Adrian feared the chamber might sense his doubts, his fears, or the sorrow he carried from losing his wife. But then he took a deep breath and stepped forward. His daughter, Lily, had told him that bravery wasn't about not feeling scared. It was about doing something good, even while scared. He held on to that thought. The healers placed the triplets' pods around the chamber, forming a circle. The emperor stood behind Adrian, ready to support him. A soft hum filled the air as the chamber awakened. The light from the walls brightened, casting long shadows that flickered like gentle flames. "Place your hands here," the chief healer instructed. Pointing to a glowing stone pedestal in the center, Adrian did. The stone felt warm, alive, almost. He closed his eyes and let himself breathe slowly. The hum grew louder, vibrating through his arms. Then he felt it again, the same warm force he had felt days ago when he first touched the triplets. It wasn't painful. It wasn't frightening. It felt like comfort, like sunlight on skin after a cold night. The triplets' pods responded immediately, glowing brighter. Their tiny forms stirred, as if reaching toward the energy. But then, something unexpected happened. The chamber recognized Adrian's energy too strongly. The walls pulsed rapidly, and a sudden wave of force pushed through him, almost knocking him backward. The emperor caught him just in time. "You must steady yourself," Valerius said calmly. "The chamber is amplifying everything you feel. Clear your thoughts," Adrian tried. He tried to focus only on helping the children, but memories rushed through him, his wife's final days in the hospital. The moment he promised to keep their daughter safe, the lonely nights after she passed. His heart felt heavy, and the chamber reacted to that heaviness. Shaking with trembling light, the emperor stepped closer and spoke softly. "Adrian, think of hope. Think of the reason you keep fighting every day." Adrian opened his eyes slightly and saw a small bracelet on his wrist. Lily had made it for him years ago, woven from simple colored threads. It reminded him of laughter, sunlight, and small hands hugging him tightly. He focused on that feeling, love, pure and simple. The chamber calmed, the light steadied. Adrian felt the energy flow through him again, but this time it was smooth and controlled. He guided it gently toward the pods. The triplets responded immediately. Their bodies glowed softly like stars waking after a long sleep. Minutes passed, long tiring minutes. Sweat dripped down Adrian's forehead, and his arms trembled. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. He felt the triplets' life energy pulling toward him, trusting him, leaning on him. Finally, with one last surge of warmth, the chamber released a soft chime, signaling the ritual was complete. The lights dimmed to normal. Adrian's legs gave out, and he fell to his knees, exhausted. But the moment he looked up, his breath caught in his chest. The triplets were breathing steadily, strong, calm, and full of life. The Emperor stepped forward quickly, his eyes wide with relief. It was the first time Adrian had ever seen him look almost emotional. "They will live," the chief healer confirmed. "You saved them." Adrian felt a wave of relief so deep it nearly brought him to tears. Valerius offered him a hand, helping him stand. "You have given me back my children. No reward can match that." Adrian managed a tired smile. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," the Emperor said firmly. "You did what only you could do." As the group escorted Adrian out of the chamber, he felt lighter, though still tired. He thought he had reached the end of this strange journey, but he was wrong. Saving the triplets was only the beginning. Something ancient had awakened inside him. Something that connected him strangely to the alien world he had stepped into by accident, and that hidden truth would soon change not just his life, but the fate of the entire empire. The palace felt different after the healing ceremony. The atmosphere, once filled with anxiety and fear, now carried a soft warmth, as though every corner of the grand halls was quietly celebrating the triplets' recovery. Servants walked with lighter steps. Guards nodded respectfully whenever Adrian passed. Some even whispered his name with awe, as if he had become a figure out of legend rather than a simple human janitor. But Adrian did not feel like a legend. He felt tired, humbled, and deeply relieved that the children were safe. His body still carried a dull ache from the powerful energy he had channeled in the ritual chamber. His hands trembled slightly whenever he remembered the brightness of the moment the chamber awakened. Yet there was a peaceful satisfaction in him that made every ache bearable. That morning, the Emperor invited Adrian to join him in the Garden of Silver Leaves, a quiet place behind the palace where the trees shimmered softly under the sun. The garden was usually off-limits to anyone but the royal family. But Valerius opened the gate for Adrian himself. The Emperor spoke gently as they walked along a stone path. "My children are awake now. The healers say they will be well enough to leave their pods by evening." Adrian let out a long breath he didn't realize he was holding. "That's the best news I've heard in years." Valerius stopped beside a glowing fountain and turned toward him. "Adrian, there is something I need to speak with you about." Adrian nodded, sensing the seriousness in the Emperor's tone. When the chamber awakened, Valerius continued slowly. "It connected you to an ancient force. It responded to you more strongly than anyone in my empire. This means something. My advisors believe your presence here is not an accident." Adrian looked down at his hands, unsure how to respond. "I never asked for any of this. I was just trying to do the right thing." Perhaps Valerius said softly, "That is exactly why the energy chose you." Before Adrian could reply, small footsteps echoed through the garden. He turned and saw a healer approaching with a bright expression. "They're asking for you," she said cheerfully. "All three of them." Adrian's heart squeezed. He followed her eagerly, and Valerius walked beside him with long, graceful steps. When they reached the healing chamber, the triplets were awake. Their small faces glowed with life. Their eyes sparkled with curious light as they sat up slowly inside their pods. Looking around the room as though seeing the world for the first time, the moment they saw Adrian, they reached their tiny hands toward him. Adrian's breath caught. Their innocent trust, their delicate movement, it filled him with a deep, warm emotion that surprised him. Valerius stepped forward and lifted one of the children gently. "They remember your energy. They remember the warmth that saved them." Adrian approached carefully, unsure if he should hold them. But one of the triplets leaned forward and touched his chest with a tiny hand as if recognizing his heartbeat. Without thinking, Adrian held out his arms, and the child leaned into him naturally. Resting against him with peaceful comfort, Adrian felt a soft ache in his heart, a familiar ache he used to feel when his daughter, Lily, crawled into his arms as a baby. It was the ache of love, simple and pure. The healers watched with admiration. The Emperor watched with something deeper, something close to gratitude that went beyond words. After some time, the children grew sleepy, and the healers gently returned them to their soft resting beds. Adrian stood quietly, soaking in the moment. Later that afternoon, the Emperor asked Adrian to join him in the throne room. The room was grand, with high ceilings and tall windows that filled the hall with bright white light. But despite the formality of the place, Valerius spoke to Adrian with sincerity. "It's not authority. You are no longer just a janitor," he said. "You are someone this empire will forever honor. My advisors have suggested granting you a title, land, and a position in the royal court." Adrian blinked, stunned. "A title? I don't know what to say." Valerius smiled kindly. "I am not asking you to become something you are not. I am offering recognition for what you have done." Adrian took a deep breath. He had never imagined anything like this. He came from a simple life, small home, long working hours, and a daughter who depended on him. He had never wished for power, fame, or status. All he ever wanted was stability and a future for his daughter. "I appreciate it," Adrian said softly, "but the only thing I want is to be a good father." Valerius nodded. "Your daughter will be welcomed here whenever you choose. I give you my word." Those words carried more comfort than any title could. Adrian bowed slightly, not out of formality, but out of genuine respect. In the following days, as the triplets continued to recover, Adrian found himself spending more time with them. They reached for him whenever he entered the room. They smiled at him, laughed softly, and sometimes even tugged at his shirt with surprising strength. Each moment with them reminded him of the deep bond that had formed. During the healing ritual, he also began to understand something new, something that had been slowly growing inside him since the day he touched the triplets for the first time. He realized that the strange energy inside him wasn't just a force. It was a connection or bridge between him and these children, and perhaps even between humans and aliens. One evening, as he sat beside the triplets while they slept, the Emperor approached him quietly. "They see you as part of their family," Valerius said softly. "Children do not form such bonds easily, especially mine." Adrian kept his eyes on the sleeping triplets. "I care about them. A lot." Valerius placed a hand behind his back and stood in thoughtful silence. "Then stay. Stay in this palace. Work with my healers. Help us understand the connection you share with my children. We need you. They need you." Adrian felt torn. He had his human life, his job, and his responsibilities. But he had also found purpose, here real purpose. He had saved lives and discovered a part of himself he never knew existed. He was no longer just a man struggling through life. He was someone who could protect, comfort, and heal. He pictured his daughter Lily. He imagined her running through the palace gardens, laughing as the silver leaves shimmered. He imagined her growing up around beings from many worlds, learning kindness and strength from all of them. He imagined a life where she would never feel alone, where she would have a father she could be proud of. Adrian gently touched one of the triplets' small hands. The tiny fingers curled around his own, and in that quiet moment he made his decision. He looked up at Valerius with steady eyes. "I'll stay." The Emperor smiled, not as a ruler pleased with a decision, but as a father grateful for an ally. "Then you are part of this family now." The days that followed were filled with joy. The triplets grew stronger and healthier. Adrian trained with the palace healers to understand the energy inside him. Lily arrived soon after and felt instantly at home, playing happily with the small alien children who adored her. And as Adrian watched the stars from the palace balcony one night, Lily asleep in his arms, he felt a deep, peaceful certainty. He had not just saved the triplets, he had saved himself. He had found a new beginning, not by searching for it, but by following a moment of courage that led him into a world he never expected. And in that world, he found family. A family across worlds. A family born from hope, A family that would shape the future of two species forever?